When we talk about survival in World War II, most people think of weapons, tanks, or armies. But for the soldier trapped behind enemy lines, starving in the cold or surrounded with no reinforcements, survival wasn't about what they were issued. It was about what they could create, adapt, or, twist into something lethal. Some of the most effective survival tricks weren't sanctioned by generals, weren't taught in manuals, and in many cases were outlawed after the war because of how brutally effective they proved to be. These were skills whispered from man to man, improvised in basements and carried out under conditions where hesitation meant death. In this video, you'll discover 9 survival tricks World War II soldiers used that were so effective, so deadly, that many were later banned. Stick with me, because these stories aren't just relics of the past. They're warnings and lessons that matter even now. One of the most chilling survival adaptations came from the entrenching tool. Issued to every soldier to dig foxholes, these short spades were never meant as combat weapons. Yet on the Eastern Front, where rifles froze in the snow and ammunition ran dry, Soviet and German soldiers alike began sharpening their shovels into blades. Edges were filed on rocks until they could split bone as easily as earth. Training manuals were quietly adapted to teach swings, blocks and thrusts with the shovel as though it were a sword. In the close confines of a trench, a gun was useless at arm's length. A sharpened shovel, silent and brutal, gave soldiers an edge that no rifle could match. After the war, governments recognized just how effective these improvised blades were. Many armies banned sharpening shovels entirely, but veterans remembered. Even today, some survivalists still sharpen entrenching tools, not as weapons of war, but as reminders that the simplest tools are the deadliest when adapted. The Molotov cocktail was born from desperation. In 1939, during the Soviet invasion of Finland, defenders without heavy weapons turned bottles into firebombs. A glass bottle filled with gasoline or kerosene, a rag stuffed in the neck and a flame, that was enough to halt a tank. Flames poured into vents, blinded crews and forced soldiers to abandon vehicles. Across Europe, resistance groups from Warsaw to Paris adopted the Molotov as the poor man's anti-armour weapon. The danger was its simplicity. Any civilian could make one anywhere without factories or supply chains. Because of that, many governments banned their use after the war, fearing uprisings. But their legacy lived on. For soldiers who had nothing else, that bottle was more than fire, it was hope. Soldiers built explosive traps from food tins. When ammunition ran short, partisans across Europe turned sardine cans and ration tins into trip mines. Packed with match-head powder, stolen gunpowder or phosphorus, these cans were wired with bent nails and strings stretched across paths. When triggered, they produced a crack and flash that startled patrols, slowed advances, and bought precious seconds to escape. They weren't powerful enough to level buildings, but they were effective at creating panic and confusion. Because they could be made from common scraps, armies later outlawed and destroyed manuals teaching the technique. The lesson was clear. The most effective survival tricks were not about destruction, but about time, buying moments to fight another day. The hidden shot inside a pen. In Nazi-occupied territories, carrying a firearm could mean instant execution. Yet resistance fighters still found ways to arm themselves. One of the most infamous survival tricks was the pen gun. Built from small metal tubes, springs and nails, these crude one-shot pistols looked just like ordinary writing tools. They were smuggled into prison camps, hidden in coat sleeves, and used at close range to kill guards or even seize rifles. A single bullet, one spring and the courage to use it, that was enough to turn captivity into escape. After the war, the pen gun was classified as a prohibited weapon in many countries. Its effectiveness lay in deception. It showed that survival sometimes comes not from firepower but from hiding lethality in plain sight. Bread was turned into bombs. Honestly, few tricks capture the brutal creativity of WWII survival more than the bread bomb. In occupied Poland and France, where grenades were scarce, resistance fighters hollowed loaves of bread and packed them with explosives, nails and shrapnel. Carried in baskets or delivered to checkpoints, They looked like food, not weapons. German convoys and supply lines were hit by what seemed like an innocent ration. The horror wasn't just the explosion, it was the realization that even daily bread could not be trusted. After the war, conventions banned disguising explosives as food or medicine, labeling it unlawful deception. But in the heat of occupation, those fighters didn't care about legality. Bread bombs were survival, pure and simple. Musical instruments became lethal traps. Pianos left behind in abandoned homes across France and Belgium became deadly weapons. Resistance fighters learned that German officers, confident in their occupation, often tested the keys of a piano they found. So the resistance wired explosives to the hammers or hid charges beneath the keys. One touch, one chord, and the room erupted. Radios, music boxes, and even toys were rigged in similar ways. This tactic instilled fear in soldiers who thought they were safe among relics of culture. It was banned after the war under international agreements against booby-traps disguised as civilian objects. Yet the memory lingered. Beauty itself had been weaponized. Survival supplies were hidden in graveyards. With patrols searching homes and barns, resistance groups turned to the one place nobody looked: cemeteries. Weapons, radios, food, and even documents were buried in coffins or beneath gravestones, marked by subtle scratches only insiders understood. Patrols rarely searched graves, considering them useless or sacred. This gave fighters a secure storage system in plain sight. Graveyards became secret supply chains across Poland, Hungary, and Yugoslavia. After the war, militaries studied and outlawed similar concealment methods, fearing they would resurface in future conflicts. Yet the trick remains a powerful lesson. Survival isn't always about force, it's about using what others overlook. Maps were carried without paper. Carrying a paper map in occupied Europe was a death sentence. Resistance couriers solved this by memorizing routes, then burning the maps before departure. Sometimes they encoded directions into rhymes, songs, or even scents left on trees with herbs or vinegar. If caught, they had nothing incriminating. This burned map method was later restricted in military training, considered too dangerous if it spread beyond resistance cells. But it highlighted an enduring truth: survival isn't always in your hands. Sometimes it has to live in your memory. Even boots became weapons. In Warsaw and Yugoslavia, fighters embedded razor blades, broken glass, or saw teeth into the soles of their boots. Blackened with soot to avoid reflection, these modified shoes turned every kick into a weapon. A stomp in close combat could end a fight silently, giving the underarmed resistance a deadly equalizer. Governments later banned such disguised weapons under rules of war. But for the men who wore them, it was a last line of defense when there was nothing else to fight with. What these banned tricks reveal about survival: every one of these survival methods was born from desperation. They weren't standard issue, they weren't factory-made, they were built from what was already in a soldier's hand: bread, bottles, boots, and memory. Some were outlawed because they blurred the line between soldier and civilian, weapon and tool, survival and sabotage. But that's exactly what made them so powerful. For modern history enthusiasts and survivalists, these tricks are more than curiosities. They remind us that when everything fails, survival belongs to those who adapt. And in the end, that adaptation is what kept countless soldiers alive. The men and women of World War II didn't just fight with what they had, they fought with what they could create. That lesson is as relevant today as it was then. If you want to keep uncovering the hidden skills, the forgotten hacks, and the survival wisdom that history almost buried, make sure you subscribe to the channel, share this video, and help keep these lessons alive.